Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at the Firestone Air Command air compressor system. Now this is going to be for a single path bag, and this is going to be wireless and smartphone enabled, so you can control it from the touch of your screen. Having airbags on a truck is really nice because when you put a load in the back and that vehicle's squatting, it really puts a lot of wear on the suspension, not only in the back, but in the front mostly. You're gonna lose your steering feel, your braking, and it's just gonna wear your tires funny. Your headlights are gonna aim a little bit higher. So there's a lot of different things that happens when a vehicle has weight on it. So the airbag helps fix that. Well, you have manually filled bags, which is pretty nice. You can just put it up to a Schrader valve with an air compressor and fill it up. But what if you want to just be able to do that from the comfort of your own vehicle and be able to do it on the fly without needing a compressor or stopping at a gas station to have to fill it up? Well, now you can do that with the compressor being on board. Now this app is a great option. Instead of having manual controls and that you have to actually mount in your vehicle, you're not going to be taking up any space. It's simply just going to go on your phone and you'll be able to control it on the fly. Now it's really nice because you can set your target PSI and put it in a memory mode, and that way if you're using this consistently, you can actually just go to your memory mode and it'll fill up. Now you may ask, how fast does it actually fill? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually set my target. I'm going to put it down to 5, which is our minimum. And I can do that just by moving this set point or the target needle, or I can actually adjust it using our arrows here. So you can see it's bleeding out pretty quick and it's giving us accurate live readouts of the pressure. Now going from that 5 PSI up to 30 PSI is rated at about 17 seconds. And the great part is you can hear the compressor kick on knowing that it's filling the bags, and you can see it actively filling. But the great part is the compressor's relatively quiet. It's a light duty compressor, so it's rated to 120 PSI. So it's important to check to make sure that your Firestone bags are rated for that. You're not over exceeding the compressor or the bags themselves. So here we are at 5. I'm gonna go ahead and put it to 30 just by dragging our needle, and you can see it's ticking up. And once set, I just let go and it's filling. Now it's going to fill a little bit past that 30 and then kind of bleed it off to where it's perfectly at our set point. I really do like how simple this app is too. It's very user friendly, and there is a night mode as well. So if this is something that you have mounted up on a dash clip for your phone, you can put this on a night mode during night, and that way it's not this white background and being too bright. So as we can see, it is going a little bit past our set point, and then we'll hear it kind of dissipating that little extra pressure until it reaches our exact set point. Now having airbags on a truck is great, and having a manual fill is just fine, but sometimes we catch ourselves in places that we can't just fill up the bags on the fly. We don't have a compressor, or there's not a gas station around, and honestly sometimes you just don't want to get out and do it. And that's the glory of this system. So here we see our compressor, and as the name implies, it pulls air in, compresses it to where it actually puts that in the bag, and this feeds off of our ECU here. And this is the brains behind the operation, as it actually sends information to our app, allowing us to control the pressure in the bags on the fly at the touch of our screen. Now the kit comes with a push connect T-fittings, or a few of them, and really you're just tying into your existing lines of your bags. Now this is a single path system, meaning that you're really filling both bags at the same time. There's no individual control of each bag, which is generally fine for most people. Now it's going to be pretty simple. The airlines will run back to our compressor as well as that ECU. And these connections, you can see this wire loom here, is all part of the harness that comes in the kit. And it makes it really easy, plug and play. There's really no way that you can misplug anything in. Now, those connect into the ECU, and you have your wires that also attach here to your compressor, but the rest of it runs up and just goes to our power source. And that's actually got a fuse inline, so it's actually prevented. No damage is going to happen if a shortage occurs. Now, even with the onboard compressor and the adjustability of pressure on your phone, things can happen where those can malfunction. And if that's the case, you may still need to put air in your bags. Well, this actually retains a manual fill valve. So even if your electronics, for whatever reason, aren't working, you can still manually fill and deflate your bags. Now, as far as the installation goes, this is pretty easy to do. The wire harness has everything already kind of run for you, so you just kind of have to stretch that harness from the front, attach it to the battery, and then back to where you want to mount your compressor as well as the ECU. So you're going to be drilling a little bit just to mount those up, but if you've installed the bags previously, this is going to be a cakewalk. It should be able to be done pretty easily without really having to jack the truck up. You should be able to take a creeper and do this in your driveway. And the great part is you have full controllability from your phone. It's really nice. You're never going to have to worry about coming back here, filling it up, or if, out of service from the free air at the gas station, doesn't matter. You have your phone there, you can adjust it, and it's going to be set exactly where you want, and you can monitor it the whole time. So if you are worried if you have a leak or not, it's actually going to show you that it is lowering down. So that's something nice too. You can monitor how your bags are actually doing. Now, as far as the installation of this, I think the hardest part sometimes is laying out where you want everything to go. And the rest of it kind of falls into place pretty quickly. So the first thing I actually did was take the harness, and on this end, you're going to see there's going to be this orange plug as well as this spade connector. Now, the rest of it does run to a fuse holder as well as 2 ring terminals, which that needs to go to the actual battery on the vehicle. And that way we can actually draw power and power up the system. So what you're going to want to do is take that end, start at your battery, and then you're going to want to run it down, following along the frame rail and getting this in a good spot. And really, once you determine that, you'll know how much length you have to work with, and it's going to make it laying out your compressor as well as that ECU a lot easier. So you know that you have to connect to your battery, so I suggest making sure you have that run up to there, and sometimes it's going to be hard to run those wires through. So if you use maybe a wire, I use airline tubing, and you may actually have some extra in your kit that you can use to actually fish wire through, take those wires and pull it up. And once you know that you're close to your battery, you can route the rest of it, and that's going to bring us to running it along the frame rail. Now, I tried my best to keep this with the factory runs, and that way you know it's going to be safe from moving parts and as well as heat. So a lot of times you need to make sure that you're not touching exhaust or anything that it could catch while driving. And pretty much just throw a few zip ties along the way, and you can actually use some of the factory stuff here. And then from this, I just routed over my gas tank, and that's going to keep it nice and protected, which brings us to where I actually want to mount our compressor. So I've simply just run the rest of the harness over, and this is just our DEF tank that I just kind of zip tied in place. And the reason I left it here is because our compressor and ECU are going to mount up really nice here. It's also going to be pretty close to where our bags are already there, and so tying into those existing lines is going to make it a lot easier, having everything close by and in a nice open spot. So that leads us to our next thing, mounting up our compressor. So the 2 components that we actually need to mount up on the frame are going to be the compressor, and this is our little ECU or our air command unit. So this is where our Bluetooth actually sends the signal. Now, these are going to be plugged into that harness, so it's going to be nice having these close together. But before we do that, we need to make sure we have our brass fitting here. Now, this is the one with the nipple is going to come off the front of the compressor, and you're going to want to just tighten that down. It doesn't have to be cranked down too tight. In fact, a lot of times brass can actually be pretty soft and crack if you go too tight, but just making sure that that's nice and snug. You also have a push connect fitting here, and you can see it's actually got thread lock already on it. So go ahead and you can screw this in here. And I'm just going to tighten it down. Again, just really, I tend to go if it's finger tight, and then I'll do about 3/4 of a turn, and that way I know that it's tight but not overly tight. And so now that we have these on there, we can go ahead and actually get this drilled in and mounted up. So when you mount up your compressor, you really do have a lot of options. It's kind of up to you. A lot of times you can actually drill in the frame rail. Now, it does come with hardware, and you're gonna have a nut and a bolt there, but what I'm gonna do is actually mount it right up here. And this is gonna put it far enough away from the exhaust. I can also be close to the connections from our harness here, and running our airlines is gonna be simple. So I'm gonna just be using some self-tapping screws to get this mounted up. Now, To get the marks that we need, I'm going to simply use a center punch, as these are they're pretty deep, so to get a pen or a marker or anything in there is going to be tight. So I'll use my center punch and get this in place where I want it. And then just make some marks so I can actually drill that out. Now when you have your compressor, you're going to want to orientate it to where you actually have this close to your things as far as like connecting to your airbag. But this nipple here is actually going to attach to an airline with a filter, and that's where it's going to draw the air from. So you're going to want to route that filter up to a spot where there's no water or anything that can get in there and clogging it and damaging your compressor. So a lot of times I like to run them up inside between the actual bed sides. You're going to have a nice pocket there to where it's pretty protected. And I'm going to be putting mine on the driver's side just to stay away from the exhaust. So having this port facing towards the driver's side seems to be ideal for our application. You may do it a little bit different, but I think this is good, and it's something you want to think about when planning out where to put your compressor. So next we need to mount up the ECU here, and so I think this spot being nice and close to the compressor is going to be good. So again, I'm going to just self-tap this in, and that should hold it up. So with our ECU mounted up as well as our compressor, you can see we have our plug from our harness, and that's just going to snap in there. We also have our other part of the harness, which is going to be the spade connector, and that's going to attach to this red wire on our compressor. Now you see that's going to leave us with this ring terminal that's hanging down, so that's just a ground screw. So what we're going to do is take a self-tapper, we're going to mount this up. Nice spot right here. I'm going to scuff this down just so it's nice and raw for it to actually have a chassis ground, but we've already made these connections, so we're moving right along. So here we have our extra airline tube with the filter attached. And again, this is where it's going to be drawing air from. So I'm going to go ahead and attach this to the nipple that we put on earlier on the compressor. And then I'm going to route this out, and that way I can kind of tuck it up in the actual fender well. So we'll go ahead and get this attached on the barb fitting. So with that attached, I'm going to run this kind of over, and then I'm going to hop on the other side and pull it up. So I've routed that airline kind of over our frame rail here, and I'm using our DEF filler hose here to kind of wrap it over that just to hold it in place. And then there's going to be a channel on the side of the bed, and I see some holes that we can actually zip tie this up, and that's going to put it up high enough to where that road grime and water's not going to splash up there. But before doing that, you're also going to want to make sure that you put a loop in it. And the reason being is this is going to actually collect water or any debris and allow the air to still pass through. So I'm just going to make that loop, put a zip tie around it for now. And then the actual head of the filter, I'll go ahead and I'm going to mount that up to those holes that I saw in the channel. Now again, you can kind of route it however you want, just make sure you have that loop. And I've found just in previous installs that this seems to be a pretty good spot, as it's protected by the inner fender liner, and really it just doesn't see a whole lot of water, and that's the main thing. It's going to see a little bit of dust just being a truck, but having it up here should protect it and give your compressor clean air. So now we're going to take a little bit of airline tube, and we're going to be connecting to our quick connect fitting here. So now I'm going to show you this in the fact of the most problems you'll have with an airbag, if at all, is going to be coming from the cuts that are on the line. So if you put something that's crooked like that, that's not going to seat properly in those push connects. And also if you use just a pair of snips, a lot of times they'll actually crimp it down, cause it to kind of elongate. So we have these airline tubing cutters here at eTrailer. I've never used them until I started working here. They're really nice for this because they put just the right amount of pressure. You can get a nice square cut, and it's gonna be nice and clean. So if you wanted to pick up some of these, we have some here at eTrailer. A razor blade works pretty well too. Just again, try not to crush the line too much, and that's gonna help ensure that you have a nice solid fit. So once you have that cut, we're gonna simply push this in, and you'll feel a little resistance. Push a little bit more and you should kind of feel that kind of click in. Kind of give it a quick tug just to make sure that it's not going to come out. Now we're going to make a loop again, just like we did with the air filter, just to kind of trap any water or anything like that. So I think a nice loop like this should be fine. So I'll go ahead and cut here. And from here, I'm going to just take my T that's included in the kit, and I'm going to make this connection right here. Now you can take some of that residual line, and I'm going to just make a small cut here, only about a little over a foot. It doesn't need to be too big for our situation here. And I'm just going to attach it to the leg off of that T, and that's going to go to our ECU, as there's a push connect on there as well. So we'll just attach this. And this is going to go right in here. So now we need to get another line or a length of line, and we're going to tie into our existing airbags. Also grab another T, and I'll meet you back under here. Now we're getting ready to tie into our lines that we have run for our bags, and our bags are actually set up for a dual path manual fill, and that's not to worry. But it is going to take a little bit of changing up here, as our compressor is actually set up for a single path, meaning you really can only fill the bags with one control. There's no individual control. Not a big deal, but I am going to have to change up our routing now because we do have our two manual valves here. So what I'm going to do first before tying into any bags is this is a safe practice is to actually drain the bags of any pressure. That way when you cut into the line, you're not actually having air pressure pop off. So once you drained your bags, again, we'll be using that T-fitting and some line to tie into them, and I'll be back in just a sec once I have it all hooked up, and I'll show you how it looks. So I've grabbed the extra airline tube and I hooked it up to our T. From here, I kind of just made an extra loop here and zip tied it up, and it's going to run to this little frame rail here, and I actually have the T right there, and that's going to split off. So if you kind of just follow this along, that's going to go to this bag, and the other one actually routes over and into our other. Now you are going to see I've also put an extra T in line, and that's for our manual fill. So you're going to put that there. That's going to route back to our Schrader valve, and that way, just in case your compressor decides to not work, you can still manually fill your bags and still get the use of bags while towing. So with all of my connections made underneath here, I've gone ahead and I've just zipped up the extra line that we had as a loop, as well as the rest of that harness, just to kind of keep it clean and out of the way. Now, something else I'll point out is if you do have to run lines close to the exhaust, I try my best to actually omit going that way, but sometimes you can't. There is a thermal sleeve. You can see it installed previously here, and that's going to add a little bit of protection to this airline from heat. So if you need to, slide that on before actually pushing the connection in, and zip tie that in place just for a little added protection. But really just making sure everything's up and out of the way, away from any moving parts. That way they're not going to get damaged. And I just kind of go back and zip tie everything up. That way it's not going to come loose over time. So now this is the portion that I ran up to our battery earlier on. And you can see what we have is going to be a fuse holder here. And from that, there actually is a red ring terminal here. That's going to go to our positive on the battery. Now this one has a yellow wire, and this actually doesn't run anywhere. You do want to keep it protected still. In fact, I'm going to go through and kind of tape this end and just tuck it in a safe place. Under the engine bay should be fine, as it's not going to get water in it. And then we have this ring terminal here with the black. This is going to be just a ground, and you can use a self-tapper for this, but there's actually a factory ground here in the engine bay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to mount that on there, and that's going to make it a lot easier than having to drill holes. Now we're going to get our fuse holder in place, and really just kind of anywhere here that's open metal is going to be a nice spot for it. And that way you can access the fuses if you ever need to. It's going to kind of tuck this out of the way. So I'm going to put it right here. Okay, so now that just leaves us, we have that yellow wire again that we can kind of tuck back and zip tie up. And then really all we have to do is take our red ring terminal here, and we're going to go to our positive terminal on our battery. All right, so we'll put our ring terminal on here, and then we'll get this tightened back down. Now you may need to wedge something underneath here, as this hex actually has to catch for it to tighten, but with a little bit of pressure underneath it, I'm just using a plastic trim panel tool. That's going to allow me to tighten this down. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to zip tie these up, kind of clean it up a little. I'm going to also wrap this end with a little more electrical tape just to protect it a little bit more, and then we can actually get ready to test out our bags. So everything is connected, we have our electrical running to it. So next we need to actually make sure that we have our Firestone Air Command app, and we'll simply click that. It's going to scan for our ECU. So we open up the app, we have the engine running, so we have our 12-volt supply to it. Now I'm just going to go ahead and set our target PSI. And you can actually have two memory modes, which is really nice. So we'll go to memory 1, that's going to be 10. And as you can see, the black is going to be your target and the red is the actual. So I've heard my compressor kick on, and it's going to find that pressure for us real quick. And you could actually hear it dispersing that pressure. And there it is at 10. So if I wanted to change this, that's no problem. We can actually just bump this up a hair. Let's go 60 PSI. So once that's set, compressor kicks on, and you're going to see this slowly raise up until it reaches its target pressure. Now this is a good time if your pressure is not building. That's very possible that you do have a leak. And before we really hit the road, we are going to go back under and do a leak check. But part of that is actually putting pressure in the bags. And 60 PSI should be plenty for us to see if there's any leaks occurring. So we'll give it time. It's going to get up to our target of 60, and then we'll take a look underneath. Now what's nice too is you can actually adjust it with the up or down arrow, or you can really actually click where you want it here on the gauge, and that's going to set your target either way. So here we are just about at 60, and now it seem to overfill a little bit, and then it's actually going to bleed that back down to our 60. So once we get that 60 PSI in the bags, I'm going to go ahead, shut our truck off, and now we can go check for some leaks. So to check for leaks, the best way to do it, audibly I can't hear anything, but sometimes little leaks will actually hide, and the best way to see that is using a soap water solution here. I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to spray down all my connection points, and that's going to kind of allow that air that might be leaking through to push out, and it's going to create a pretty large bubble. And it'll be pretty noticeable when you see those bubbles getting big. And if that's the case, more than likely that's where your leak is coming from. And I suggest getting your line taken out of the push connect by simply pushing in as well as pulling at the same time, and going back and making sure you have those nice clean cuts, no burrs or anything like that, should alleviate it. Now once you have everything all installed, you've checked your leaks and you've tested that your smartphone is actually working with your compressor, you're going to want to make sure you put your spare tire back up before hitting the road. And other than that, you get to enjoy the adjustability of the bags just from your phone. So that's a look and installation of the Firestone Air Command air compressor system with light duty bags that's smartphone enabled.